When it comes to longevity, we should all be as blessed as Mike Rabb. His parents, Emma Fernandez and Alan Lewis Rabb, were married on January 20th, 1897, in Columbus, Mississippi. They had 8 children, but 2 of them died, leaving them with 6 boys to raise, including Mike, who is nearly 100 years old.
My birthday is October the 25th, 1913.
And though his name is well known and highly respected, you might be surprised to learn that Mike is not his name.
My name is Louis Adolph Rabb, R-A-B-B. I know everybody else's name, but my father nicknamed all of his boys. But he just happened to nickname me Mike, and it stuck. Everybody calls me Mike Rabb.
His father was a successful businessman who owned a meat market. The family home was next door.
No, they were not rich. As a matter of fact, a lot of people who saw all those sisters together with the fine clothes, but that's the way they dressed.
Though Mike shared fond memories of his childhood in Columbus, Mississippi, his progress there was limited by the standards of that time.
In Mississippi, people of my color will only go to the 10th grade. That's as far as they will let you go.
His brother Maurice Rabb, who was 14 years older than Mike, would become a doctor. This brother and Mike's father insisted that Mike enroll at Tuskegee Institute High School. When Mike arrived, he was only 13.
I didn't want to come to school. My father packed me up and had men working for him take me down to the train in a little town in Columbus, Mississippi, and they stayed on the train until they got picked up enough speed and they jumped off. I cried all the time the first year. They put me in Thrasher Hall, which was a little boy's dormitory, way up on the 3rd floor, where they had pine straw mattresses for you to sleep on. But it just happened that there was a person from my hometown. I didn't know it. He was the captain of the football team. So he had them bring me down to him in our room with him during my first year. Told my brother, I finished high school for you, not for me. He said, but Mike, it's important for you to go, you got to go to college. I said, Maurice, I don't want to go to college. So he just insisted that I try for 1 year. At that time, they gave you a 2-year certificate in college. And I said, all right, I'll sign up for the 2 years. And when that was up, I was finished. He said, Mike, now it wasn't so bad. Now, I said, why don't you just stay here and finish college? So I said, oh, Maurice, all right, I'll stay here for you. And I stayed here and I finished college. But when I finished college, the new president had just been elected to replace Dr. Moden, Dr. Robert R. Moden, who was the second president of Tuskegee. So I needed a job. This was back in during the Depression, and I didn't know where I was going to land if I didn't have a job. So I went to Dr. Patterson, and he gave me a job across the street in the cafeteria, which had just been started. But when I got over there, the manager found out that I had graduated in business administration. So he made me his assistant.
His experiences at Tuskegee University enriched his life in so many ways. This is where he spent his entire professional career, never worked anywhere else and never wanted to. This is where he welcomed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's also where he first saw the woman who would become his wife of 65 years. This is where he encountered the man who revolutionized the agriculture industry, a humble man still celebrated today for his innovations in medicine, horticulture, science, and art.
But when I first came to Tuskegee, I met Dr. Carver. I didn't know who he was. I was walking from now the Carver Museum, which was the student laundry, and he stopped me as I was walking up the wall. He said, "Young man, do you know what kind of tree this is?" I looked up here, I know. Started to walk away. He grabbed me, and he reprimanded me for not knowing that that was an oak tree. I still didn't know who he was. He looked like a bum. After he released me, and I started to walk away, and the young man said, "Boy, do you know who that was you were talking to?" I said, "No." He said, "That was Dr. Carver." I said, "Well, and I said, what the hell is Dr. Carver? I don't know a thing about him." But that's the way I met him. But I found out that he was a very important man.
Among his prized possessions is a picture of Dr. Carver with a note to Mike, handwritten by Dr. Carver himself. And like so many others who appreciate Mike Rabb, perhaps Dr. Carver was impressed by the help he received from Mike.
When they came to the cafeteria, they had a walk-in refrigerator with all the stuff hanging up, you see. So it was my job to take Dr. Carver around to let him go in the walk-in refrigerator to cut fat meat off of the carcasses for him to take over to his dormitory. He got to the point where he couldn't do anything, and eventually the school brought him from the dormitory to Dorothy Hall. That's where he died.
Mike Rabb's relationship with Tuskegee University dates back to 1927. He did not know Booker T. Washington, but the other 5 presidents, now that's a different story.
Dr. Moden, Dr. Patterson, Dr. Foster, Dr. Payton, and Dr. Roshan. So I've known them all since Booker T. Washington. And incidentally, Dr. Roshan introduces me to the people as the only person who knew all of the presidents personally, and I did. I came in under Dr. Moten. I knew all of his family. He had 3 girls and 2 boys. And it just happened that one of the boys was my classmate in high school and in college, Robert R. Moden Jr.
The next president moved Mike out of the cafeteria and into the first of many administrative executive positions.
Dr. Patterson transferred me after the first year to the labor office. In those days, all students had to work. There was no paying your way through. Of course, you only had a half a dozen people who could pay their way through, but they had to work. So my job was to give jobs to students. But he said, "Rabb, you're doing a nice job over there for us as Secretary of Labor." He says, "We are sending you to Columbia to get your master's degree in personnel work." That's just to strengthen me to be able to do a better job in the labor office. I was surprised because I thought when he called me, he was going to fire me.
Dr. Luther Foster was responsible for Mike's next transition.
He was not the president at that time. He was the vice president for business affairs. And he persuaded me after I've been over to the labor office about 3 or 4 years to transfer to the hospital because he thought my future would be better if I transferred and learned something about hospital administration. So I transferred. I was very reluctant to do it, but I transferred to the hospital and I worked under Dr. John Kinney, who was Booker T. Washington's private physician. And he was also the administrator of the hospital when they built John Andrew. And Dr. Austin and I became friends. And he told me, he said, Mike, I want you to transfer to the hospital. I said, well, all right, he's in the hospital. He said, well, just go over there part-time. And you can, if you don't like it, you can continue to give jobs to students. I told you all of the students had to work. Well, I went over there, but I liked it over there. I was head of the business office. That's all I was doing. It was Dr. Kinney's last year at Tuskegee. He had been here. He was Booker T. Washington's private physician. But he'd been away and come back, and he was going back again. You know, the Klan ran him out the first time. I don't know if you know that or not. But, so I enjoyed it over there. I enjoyed working with Dr. Kinney. And when he left, the school called me up again. I've been over in the business, working in the business office for 2 or 3 years. Basil O'Connor was chairman of the board of trustees, and they told Mr. O'Connor that they wanted to expand the hospital program. And Mr. O'Connor said he would not approve it unless they had a hospital administrator. So they called me up and said, we are sending you away to get your master's degree in hospital administration. So apply to the schools that are offering it. So they told me, he said, apply to all of them and see if you can get in. Well, I applied and I was accepted by all of them. So I chose Northwestern because of its program, hospital organization and management. Bachelor's degree in Tuskegee in business administration. I have a master's degree from Columbia in personnel work, and I have a master in hospital administration from Northwestern University. So I have 3 degrees.
Because he served as hospital administrator at John Andrew for 23 years, it's interesting to hear his perspective on the hospital's closing.
I wasn't surprised. I wasn't unhappy. We had a policy not to turn about anyway, turn around anybody. We gave all services to anyone who came. But we had a big OB program, and we didn't have any money for it. So when the people came, we took them. And you had a lot of people. I think when I was left the hospital, we had patients to come to the hospital from 34 of the 67 counties. That shows you that we took them from everywhere. And Tuskegee just couldn't afford to subsidize the hospital under those circumstances. So eventually it closed. I wasn't over there at the time. I had been transferred to the president's office as assistant to Dr. Foster, who replaced Dr. Patterson.
While working as assistant to the president, he eventually served double duty when he also was named secretary to the board of trustees. Mike Rabb worked for Tuskegee University for 46 years. He was rewarded with professional development and a series of job promotions. But there's another side to Mike Rabb. He worked hard and he plays hard. Mike and a long list of other prominent men founded a poker game, and that game is still being played today. Of the original group, Mike is the last man standing.
Well, I told you during the early days, this was a dry county. You could get no whiskey. So I had met several guys. We used to we used to get together every weekend just to drink. We would sit down talking and everything, and we would drink beer. So one of the guys said, uh, "Now why don't we form a poker club?" I didn't know what he's talking about. I'd never played poker, didn't know anything about it. There's about a half a dozen of us, but they were all PhDs, and they knew about poker. From that time on, we formed the poker club, and we've been playing poker since 1945.
New members have joined the game to fill the seats left vacant by the members who died or moved away from Tuskegee. They still play for the same reason, fun and socializing. They break for dinner, often eating gourmet feast in settings fit for kings. After dinner, they resume their card game, keeping a lovely tradition from folding.
Incidentally, we started out, I started drinking beer, and we made the poker club. Only thing that we did then that we don't do now is I really can't think of anything that we do now that we didn't do when we started. We only drank beer around, and we never drank whiskey, and we still don't.
With 3 degrees from prestigious academic institutions, Mike also has the equivalent of a PhD from the School of Hard Knocks.
My father died when I first came to Tuskegee. My mother died, and all of my brothers are dead. It left me all alone.
Pictures and memories of his loved ones are all that's left to fill the emptiness in his heart and soul.
That's my wife and daughter. Yeah. But that was taken maybe about a year before she died.
And he cherishes the beautiful life they shared together, starting from the moment he laid eyes on her.
All the students used to go down to where the Bremer building is now. The train used to back up there and let the students off, and all the old students would go down and look to see who was coming in. And I always remember the first time I met my wife-to-be. All the students would get off the train, stand around and talk, and then after a while she got off, and she walked right on through the crowd and walked right on up towards the Sage Hall, going to Whitehall to register. And my eyes followed her from the time she got off that train, all the way up to past Sage Hall, as far as I could see. But during the time she was in college, she told people, "I'm going to marry Mike Rabb." Didn't say anything to me about it, but she just said, "I'm going to marry Mike Rabb." And of course we did get married. So we were together for over 65 years. It was difficult for me. It was difficult. I remember when my wife was in the bed, I used to call Velma Bray to come over to look at her. And she came over and she put a stethoscope to my wife, and she immediately removed it. And she said, "Mike, she's dying." That hurt. That hurt. So we got together and got her by got her transported to the East Alabama Medical Center, where she died in the emergency room. That was difficult for me. And I have been single ever since then. My wife had died and my daughter had died, and I was left with everything you see. But when my wife was living, she made all of the changes. She bought everything for the house, all of the wallpaper and everything. And of course, I always supported her, anything she wanted to do. So we had a good life together, though. We had one daughter, Marcia, and she went to Tennessee State to get a master's degree. And after that, she moved to Buffalo, New York, where she worked. About 15 years ago, she had colon cancer.
In his life, there have been good times and sad, tears and laughter. Throughout it all, Mike Rabb has persevered with integrity, magnified by divine favor and grace.
I've been pretty good health. One thing I've had happen to me, I got diabetes. And I wear this all the time, everywhere I go.
And he is always on the go.
Oh, I drive. I'm fortunate. I can drive. I've been driving other people to the doctors, and a lot of them have died, like Gene Carter, Ed Price, a lot of people. Well, I've been lucky. That's all I say. I've tried to do everything that I should do, and apparently I have. And I've just tried to live a good life.
As we were closing out the interview, Mike Rabb shared his thoughts on the current president at Tuskegee University.
He's a nice man. He's well qualified, and but he's been good to me. When he came to Tuskegee, I was in the hospital up in Opelika. And when I came out, this boy who knew him took me over to his house, and I had dinner a couple of times. And but Dr. Enroshan, his wife, and his daughter have been very good to me, and I appreciate it. But since that time, he's invited me to everything, and he always introduces me as the only person that he knows from Tuskegee who had personal contact with all of the presidents except Booker T. Washington. And that's true. I know them all, know them well.
We know Mike was born October 25th, 1913. At the time of this taping, it is early in the year of 2013.
I'm 99 years old.
Celebration plans for the big 100?
I haven't thought about that because I don't expect to get there. But if I do, I just be doing the same thing I'm doing now.
His secrets for long life?
And all you have to do is just remember to wake up every morning.
No matter how hard we nudged at getting him to talk about his birthday plans, his answer stayed the same.
I don't know whether I get to 100 or not. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But I don't care. I got a place down in the cemetery with my name on the tombstone where my wife is buried. So I'm not particularly concerned about it. Yeah, I see my wife is buried here. Mm-hmm. But a lot of my friends are all along here. And all of these plots were vacant. The president of Tuskegee had bought some. But when I found out, I ordered about 15 of them. And I paid for them. All the guys gave me the money back. But all of these are my friends. All of these people, from the corner all the way down to that right there. But this is my wife and me there. As my daughter told me one time, she said, "Daddy, everybody dies." And she was right. So I just made a place for myself and my wife. What is this guy here? This one.